Hey there guys, what is going on? We ran a poll on the channel recently about what you guys wanted to see on the channel next, and it was of course weapon tier lists in Cold War. Today we are taking a look at my favorite, the best in my opinion SMGs in Cold War, and we're ranking them in some pretty interesting tiers here. This tier list maker actually did come courtesy of a wonderful YouTuber that I just found recently, Turboman. If you haven't seen any of his stuff, make sure you do go check it out. He is rocking all the Cold War content right now. Just before we do get into the tier list here, make sure you do hit that subscribe button with those notifications turned on. I really do appreciate it. It massively helps me out. Of course, we are looking for 5,000 subscribers very soon and 10,000 by the end of the year. So if we could hit that goal, that would be absolutely massive. So let's just jump straight into it here and explain our tier listing system. Alrighty, so we do have 5 tiers here. Now, we are starting at the tip top. We have the meta. These are the best guns in the game. You can pretty much get away with like using this in most situations. Most people will be able to just slap on a class setup to deal with these weapons and be able to absolutely shred people. The second list is meta, which is kind of. So the weapons that are just slightly below that. We want something that is still very, very powerful in this game, but a little bit more situational, something that might not be able to be used by everyone, or it doesn't actually appeal to all sorts of players in this game. The third one is of course viable, which are weapons that are just pretty good, nothing super spectacular about them, but they're not actually bad. Situational tier is weapons that are only really good in certain situations and really struggle in other situations. We will talk about that more in a sec. And we have the last tier, which is nah, but I don't actually know if any of the weapons really belong in like the nah tier, the dumpster tier just yet. So we do have 7 SMGs here, and we are starting off with the AK-74U, and I pretty much think you have to put this in the red, the top tier, the meta at the moment. This is just one of those weapons that is absolutely fantastic here. It just has such good statistics across the board, even though it did get nerfed recently with that sort of negative recoil controlling statistics. But this is just such a powerful weapon in this game. Being able to get a 3-shot kill with an SMG running around at very, very fast movement speeds, like fairly easy to control recoil, and it just hits very, very hard, man. This getting that 3-shot kill means this is part of the meta, and it's pretty unstoppable in most situations. It's just a very, very good gun in Cold War. I think it's also fairly interesting to consider that most of the fantastic weapons, like the top tier of the meta weapons in this game, only require 5 attachments to be very, very powerful. I'm not saying that 8 attachment weapons like the gunfighter perk aren't actually super strong, as they are, but I mean, really, really powerful weapons in this game only require 5 attachments, and the AK-74U definitely fits into that category, and that's why we've got it in the meta tier here. Alrighty, so the next weapon on our list here is the Bullfrog, and I think it's only fair to place the Bullfrog in the meta tier as well. Let me explain. Basically, with the Bullfrog, you just get such a good combination of everything. Like, you get such a very large magazine. Like, 50 round stock is actually ridiculous. It's basically a mini LMG in an SMG body. You get good damage range. I think you actually get it out to about 28 meters or so, which is pretty ridiculous. You get super reliable recoil control. This thing just moves around the map very, very quickly. There's nothing really terrible about this thing. It just performs very, very nicely. If you haven't seen the video on the Bullfrog that we did make the other day, make sure you do go check it out, because this thing absolutely slaps so hard, man. It's a very, very good weapon in this game. You cannot miss out on using this thing. You will find that a lot of better weapons in this game aren't really excelling at anything. They are just very, very consistent. Good damage, good range values are just very, very important in this game. Good bullet velocity values, they're not amazing, but they're in terms of the SMG category, they're quite high. And this thing is just one of the easiest weapons to use in the game, man. You can spray as many bullets as you want into people and you'll just get loads of kills here. Again, this is another one of those weapons that you can actually just throw on 5 attachments and absolutely thrive in. This thing absolutely dump trucks people, man. It's so powerful in this game. If you haven't used the Bullfrog yet, make sure you do try it out. The next weapon is, of course, the KSP here. And now, many of you would have seen my videos the other day and been like, the KSP, easy top tier weapon. But we are going to put the KSP here in the meta kind of section. Now, why would that be? This does have one of the fastest times to kills in the game at about 210-ish milliseconds, but this thing can't really be used by anyone. The class setup that we featured the other day is one of the better weapons in the game, man. It's just such a powerful instant kill weapon, but because it is a burst weapon, not everybody favors that style of play. It's still going to be one of those weapons that if you are missing your shots, anybody with a fully automatic weapon is going to be able to just gun you down. Despite how much damage your bursts actually do, people can just gun you down if you don't actually hit all the bullets. So the KSP is an absolutely fantastic weapon in this game. It actually dump trucks people, man. It just dumpsters them, man. They absolutely get dominated by this thing. Kills them so quickly at those close quarters distances, but if you aren't getting those 1 burst kills, getting 2 to 3 burst kills instead, you can actually struggle with this thing, and if you aren't hitting all of the shots in the burst, it's actually not super powerful, and you can usually get taken out by someone with like an automatic weapon. But if you are super accurate with this thing, this definitely belongs in the top tier, but because it's not actually be able to be used by everyone super easily, but I think this is a fairly good place for it to sit. Again, this is one of those weapons that you can run 5 attachments on and absolutely dominate people, so keep that in mind. The next thing that we have to rank here is, of course, the LC-10. Now, you guys know how I feel about this weapon. Even after the most recent nerfs, they did actually pretty much wreck this thing fairly hard, but that just shows to you how powerful this thing was previously. Like the 30-meter damage range that it did have previously, man, that's gone. It's only about 10-15 meters now, but it's still a very, very consistent, super strong weapon in this game. Again, another one of those weapons, we're putting this in the meta list because it is so super consistent. The recoil control is very, very easy to manage. It really doesn't have too much. The consistency with this thing, still okay range values when you do compare them to the rest of the classes in the SMG category, as well as having pretty decent bullet velocity still, which is a very, very crucial statistic for most weapons in this game. But I mean, this thing just still dominates people, even though it is way, way less powerful than it used to be. That just shows how strong it was before. If we were ranking this previously, like the LC-10 and the AK-74, you would have been the only meta weapons, man. This thing is just so super strong previously. It's still a little bit worse than it used to be, but it is still a very, very strong weapon in this game, and that's why we are ranking it in the meta tier. Again, 5 attachments is all you need on this thing. You can run 8, but 5 attachments, man, this thing is so super strong still. The next one is the MAC-10, which I think is a little bit of an interesting weapon in this game, and I think that's why we are ranking it in the situational tier. Now, this is a weapon that is going to struggle at those medium to longer distances, and that's your situationalness there. Like, that is why we rank this on the lower side of this tier list, because it is one of those weapons where you will struggle outside of those very close distances. If you can't use this sort of at those medium to longer distances, you're going to struggle, and that's why we have ranked this in this particular position. I do still really like the MAC-10 though. I think it is still a fairly powerful weapon in this game in the right situations. You are playing this weapon during its strong points, like in close quarter situations on Nuketown, getting in and out of buildings and stuff like that. This thing absolutely dominates at close quarters. But if you move outside of those distances, the recoil control does become a little bit difficult to manage, and it can be a little bit tough to use. So that is why we are ranking the MAC-10 in the situational tier. I do think it needs a little bit of a recoil adjustment, maybe making it just a touch better. But it's one of those things where if you touch it too much, maybe it would go into the meta tier, which is not what we're after, with every single SMG being absolutely broken in this game. To make the most of the MAC-10, I think you mostly have to run 8 attachments, which I don't usually like to do. I usually like to run those 6 perks. So being able to run those 5 attachments to class setup feels a little wonky sometimes, so I don't usually like to run this with 5 attachments, but it's one of those options where it's like, well, what can you do with this thing? It does have problems, but it's still a good weapon in this game. The next weapon on this list is, of course, the Milano 821. We've been talking about this a lot recently as an absolutely fantastic weapon in this game. Is it meta? Technically, yes, it is, but it is a little bit difficult to use as it does have that quite slow fire rate, while not having super busted damage. Like, it's more comparable to something like the AK-74 use damage, and we do rate that quite highly, but because of that slow fire rate, we're going to put this in the meta kind of tier, mostly because it can struggle if you are missing those shots. It is still full auto, but it does feel slightly less powerful as a result of that slower fire rate in relation to some of the other weapons on this list, because they just have very, very high fire rates. And the Milano can't really keep up sometimes. It's one of those things where at the right distances, when positions with the Milano 821, you're actually going to dominate people, but sometimes you can get caught off guard by that slow fire rate. If you're in very close quarters against the MAC-10, MAC-10's going to win most of the time. So it's one of those things you can absolutely dominate with the Milano 821. I think it's one of the more powerful weapons in the game, but it does still have a little bit of holes with those sort of slower fire rate. It's very, very easy to use this thing though. It's one of the better weapons in the game, and that is why I think meta kind of is an appropriate place here. You can definitely get away with running 5 attachments on this thing, and it feels absolutely fantastic to do so. And lastly, the MP5. I feel like this is a fairly okay weapon in this game. It doesn't stand out anymore as one of the more broken things, and I feel like viable is a fairly good spot to put it. Basically, middle of the road here. I feel like this is a fairly good tier list based on what we've got here. Nothing in the dumpster tier, but not every weapon is super busted. And I feel like the MP5 is just sort of in an interesting spot at the moment where it was super broken. They brought it back into line, and now it just sort of feels that middle of the road. It can be a little bit tricky to find the right attachment with this thing. It always feels like it bounces around slightly. It might be a more visual thing than actual like recoil control issues, but it's just one of those weapons that doesn't feel super consistent. It's a little strange and sort of kind of hard to describe. You might have used this and been like, yeah, I know what he's talking about. But this thing is still just quite powerful in this game. It's not one of the top tier weapons. You still get like a 5-shot kill, 6-shot kill most of the time, which in terms of other weapons getting like 3-shot kills, 4-shot kills can be a little slow, little weak in those situations. And it's an SMG that does sort of struggle at those longer distances, which, I mean, that's what SMGs should struggle at. So I feel like the MP5 being in the viable slot, not the best, but not the worst, is a pretty good place for it to end up. And that's all the weapons on this list. I feel like we've got a pretty good list here. Nothing in the dumpster tier, which is always fairly impressive to have. This is a fairly good state of balance for these weapons to be in. The meta weapons, maybe having 3 of them be absolutely top tier is not ideal for the balance, but I feel like the closer we get to having sort of be everything sort of meta kind of is probably the ideal place for the game to be, as everything can be used by pretty much anyone in any situation and everything feels pretty good all around. Anyway, guys, if you did enjoy this tier list style stuff, make sure you do leave a like, do subscribe if you are new around here. Of course, I massively appreciate it, and it really does help me out. If you disagree with this list, that's absolutely fine. Please leave a comment letting me know what you disagree with, and we'll have a chat about it. Like, that's absolutely what this is about. I love having discussions about Call of Duty, so make sure you let your thoughts be known. And of course, we are looking for 5,000 subscribers very soon and 10,000 by the end of the year. So if you could help me out, that'd be fantastic. And I, of course, will see you in the next video. Bye!